Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy Viewers. We're back with a talk video. This is the third iteration of the quarterly speculation series where we look back at what just happened and we look forward to what's on the Lucasfilm schedule so that we can start speculating on what could happen within the game and make any sort of recommendations for how to use our rosters and prepare our rosters for what could be happening in the future. The topics of this speculation video are looking at the Lucasfilm schedule and what lies ahead, considering the impacts of the fleet changes on Kyber and how that can inform future ship content. We know the Grand Inquisitor is about to come. We only have 4 within the game, so we're going to be seeing more Inquisitors, looking at who and how many Inquisitors are going to be forthcoming. Book of Boba Fett, I've been saying since the show was released that CG was going to need at least 3 months of lead time. We are now past that point where CG, I've been saying, could be introducing the Book of Boba Fett content. So here's a quick look at the Disney schedule for Lucasfilm and Marvel. I think looking at Marvel is important because the gap within the Marvel schedule will help give an indication of what is going on with the Lucasfilm schedule because they don't like to step on each other's toes. There's a lot of overlapping fans there. And right now, we don't have release dates on Andor or Bad Batch Season 2. And early indications were that Bad Batch was going to be a May the 4th release like it was last year. That's not going to be happening right now unless they surprise us, because right now they have not told us when it is coming out. So the impact of that is whether or not I think we were going to see any SWGOH content related to those shows, and now I don't. I think that is going to be pushed to next quarter at the earliest. So it's safe to say Bad Batch, anything that could happen to it is not going to happen. One of those things would have been like Bib Fortuna. I've been talking about him in previous quarterly speculation videos. I think next quarter he might become a possibility because Bib Fortuna's presence within recent Star Wars content indicates that he could, his prominence is being elevated to a point where he could be worthy of a SWGOH appearance. So the Bad Batch period that I show within this calendar is my best guess for when I think we will be seeing Bad Batch, which is late July into August is the point within the schedule that makes sense. All these blue right justified items are content that don't have release dates. The left justified items are the ones that do have release dates. With these quarterly speculation videos, there's been a couple things we've been right on. One of the overarching themes of the past 2 videos is that the lull within the Lucasfilm schedule would allow CG to revisit old content or do content unrelated to the Lucasfilm schedule, which in general was a correct assumption. One of the things we specifically talked about was the need for the Finalizer and Radis to have some tanks, which we finally saw this past quarter. But even though we now have those fleets being viable, legitimate fleets, the Kyber changes for Grand Arena needing an additional team on defense, which means an additional team on offense, means that we have no wiggle room for fleets. There are a minimum 6 fleets needed, which only leaves 1 legitimate fleet as the wiggle room there, which is really not enough. So we're going to need either more ships or more capital ships in order to make sure that in that game mode we don't see a lot of players getting stalled out by just there not being enough ship content. So I don't think that's something CG is going to delay too much further. It's maybe this only this season, but definitely this quarter we're going to see more. This month we have 2 calendars which give us some possible indication of Rebel and specifically Rebel fleet content. So Akbar as the primary login character and the bonus character gives us both Wedge and his X-Wing. The Rebel fleet still has some major omissions, so we could finally see this quarter some of those ships be added to the game and elevate this fleet. If you've seen in Grand Arena when I've mistakenly put in the wrong capital ship, the Rebel fleet still does fine, it still wins, because the home one does not contribute much. 90% of this fleet is the Falcon. So just by adding a proper capital ship, a deserving capital ship, we could have the Rebel fleet rise to another level, and then we could combine with some of the fill in the holes with the key ships that we're currently missing. The profundity I've been talking about the past 2 quarterly speculation videos. This is the only real viable rebel capital ship that could be added to the game, and with that login calendar character of Akbar, that could mean we could be seeing Admiral Radis, and if he is added to the game as a marquee character, then we're definitely going to be seeing the profundity as a capital ship. This is the only reason to be adding him to the game, or the best reason to be adding him to the game, is so that that rebel capital ship has a commander. With the Mace Windu rework, one of the big community asks within the game has been addressed. The next big one is Luke's X-Wing. We either see a marquee pilot Luke be added to the game, or we see Farm Boy Luke become a pilot, or CLS. If it is CLS, then this is going to be a journey ship, just like where we saw when the Falcon was added to the game as a legendary ship it had 2 legendary pilots. So if we see CLS be the pilot, that means this will be a journey or legendary ship event. And the next 2 glaring spots are the B-Wing fighter and the A-Wing fighter. I don't think we're going to see all these things. It's going to be one of these items. Like, we either get a new capital ship and marquee character for that ship, we get an event for Luke's X-Wing, or we get one of these additional ships to make the Rebel fleet better. But there's a problem with doing any of this with the Rebel fleet. It does not address the Grand Arena problems of having those 7 fleets. That's an untenable situation, and if we see something happen to the Rebel fleet, that does nothing to help solve the problem of not having enough fleets, because that's either going to swap out ships or it is going to elevate that fleet in its strength. It's not adding fleet depth. What we could see happen to add that much needed fleet depth and make it so that there is a little bit wiggle room when we are playing those Kyber Grand Arena levels is we get a proper Sith fleet. Nihilus's Ravager has been speculated on for a long time. It was included in some of those leaked rumors that sometimes become true, sometimes they don't, but it's still the most viable option for a Sith capital ship, and a Sith fleet would be the quickest way to adding an 8th fleet within the game. With the addition of the TIE Interceptor, what we have is more Empire fleet depth, which gives an opportunity for the TIE Advance and Emperor Shuttle to help be the basis for a proper Sith fleet. We could add to that Count Dooku's ship to give additional Sith depth. There's a short path forward that would allow CG to build out an 8th viable fleet, the Sith fleet being that shortest route. The Rebel content looks to be far more likely, but I don't see CG allowing the Grand Arena issue to exist for more than a quarter, more than a couple months. It doesn't make sense for the player base to be in that situation where there is no wiggle room to win your Grand Arena matchups for too long. So I do expect that if not this quarter, the next quarter, we will be seeing something happening here to give us that fleet depth. The one item that we do know 100% is that this quarter we have the Grand Inquisitor Legendary event, and there is a couple impacts from this event that we need to be aware of. One, we don't know if it's going to be a permanent addition to the journey guide or if it's going to rotate through like what has happened with these kind of events historically. I don't think CG has been clear one way or the other of what our expectation can be, but we need to be prepared for the possibility that it's not permanent. And even if it is permanent, I would expect that the Inquisitor that makes this event easy is not going to be available at first, so be careful with your gear. What we've seen in the past with like the Chewie event, Bosk was released afterwards, which made the event much easier. With the Padme event, there was a rework afterwards, where Geos, Newt, and Dooku were all reworked or touched up, which simplified the event greatly and reduced the gear threshold. And in general, there's usually a key character. Log Ray with the Ewok event and Dengar with the Bounty Hunter event. I would expect that the key character for the Grand Inquisitor event to not be released until after this event is at least active for a while. Which means right now, I think one of these characters at a minimum is not going to be one of the ideal characters for the Legendary event. And right now, my best bet is Second Sister. Unfortunately, you're going to want to gear her anyway for the ship. Seventh Sister, Ninth Sister, and Eighth Brother, they all have more synergy together than Second Sister. She doesn't contribute that much other than being high damage. It's nice, but she's not boosting the performance of the other Inquisitorious. I would be expecting at least 2 more Inquisitors, possibly even a third. The most obvious out of those is going to be the Fifth Brother, major character within Rebels, last major remaining of the Inquisitors right now. On top of that, I think the Purge Trooper from Fallen Order is going to be very likely, makes a lot of sense, could be swapped and moved into a Iden Verso team afterwards. So the Purge Trooper could be a character that is good for the event, good for filling out of a squad, but doesn't need to be a permanent resident after the Grand Inquisitor is added. Because that's the other impact to be aware of. Once the Grand Inquisitor is unlocked, he will be pushing one of the Inquisitors out. Those are the 2 that I'm expecting for the event. One of them may be released after the event goes live, but they are the 2 most likely candidates. But there are candidates for a third Inquisitor. They would be the 10th Brother and the 6th Brother. Both of them have much larger roles within the comics, not within filmed lore within the game. So I think they are less likely, but there's been precedent for those kinds of characters like Mara Jade coming in and being much more of a book and comic character. A third Inquisitor Marquee is less likely, but I do think there's going to be 2 minimum and a possibility of a third, which would just complicate figuring out which are going to be the core Inquisitors for the event. Book of Boba Fett was our most recent piece of Lucasfilm content, and historically, when CG does not coordinate with Lucasfilm directly, which was not the case with Book of Boba Fett, then CG has about a 3-month delay. I don't think we're going to see any Book of Boba Fett content in April. I think May the 4th is when CG will be planning to get that content out for us. With these Book of Boba Fett releases, we need to keep in mind the nesting doll concept that CG will design and release character kits around. That's going to affect which characters I think are going to be forthcoming, because there's only certain characters CG was able to anticipate prior to the release of Book of Boba Fett, which means there's one character that I know that we all want that I'm not convinced is going to be part of a Scion of Django team. First up is the Gamorrean Guard. Easily able to be anticipated from trailers from Mando Season 2, from Bad Batch. Gamorrean Guard has been seeing a huge presence within recent Star Wars. That is something that CG could easily have anticipated and put into some synergy with Scion. For a long time now, I've been looking for a rework or a touch-up, or at a minimum an Omicron for this character. I think we do finally get it. He was also a bonus calendar character last month. If he does get that Omicron, though, I think it will be a Territory War Omicron if he does become a part of that Scion of Django squad. Paz Vizsla is the next character I expect to see and could function. Probably more of a Beskar Mando character that we could end up seeing instead of a Scion of Django character. Paz was easily anticipated from Mando Season 1. His role within Book of Boba Fett implies a significant presence moving forward. From there, we've got Cobb Vanth, another fan favorite, another character that makes slightly more sense with Mando than he does with Scion, but he was in the show. He could be anticipated from prior seasons of Mando. Would not be surprised to see him. I do expect we will see Black Chrysanthemum. I'm just not convinced that we are going to see him be specifically designed for a Scion of Django kit, because he was the one character that was a surprise that could not be anticipated from previous seasons of Mandalorian. So I don't think any long-term plans for the design of Scion of Django could have been anticipated with Chrysanthemum as a character. That could have been done with the Gamorrean Guard and some of these other characters. But there is some potential where CG could have designed some general idea for another character they would be adding to a future squad that Chrysanthemum would be able to take up some of those mechanics. I may not think Chrysanthemum is going to lead the releases for the Book of Boba Fett characters, but we're definitely going to be seeing him within this quarter, because he's the type of character that would attract players who have quit the game back to the game. He's the type of marquee character that whales are going to spend on. Everyone is going to want Chrysanthemum. CG's not going to waste time with this potential payday of delaying his release. He is coming out within the next 3 months. In the previous 2 versions of the quarterly speculation video, I've planted my flag on Tuskens, on Tusken Warrior and on Tusken Boba, but it's too close to Scion of Django where I think we get another variant of Boba Fett. I don't think it'll be happening this quarter or part of this chunk of Book of Boba Fett content. Maybe with Book of Boba Fett Season 2 or before Mando Season 3 this happens, but I do think it will be happening at some point. We have an incomplete squad of Tuskens, adding the Tusken Warrior as a 4th and Tusken Boba as a leader just makes a ton of sense. We could also have a 5th one, either another kind of Tusken leader that could function as a 5-man squad that would work towards, or the basis for having a Tusken Boba as a legendary character, as a legendary unlock. The other thing that might happen this quarter, because at the rate of which we've been seeing Omicrons released in the game, I would not be surprised by a Tusken Raider Omicron. That would begin to be the foundation of a larger rework and touch-up of the Tusken squad. There will be a day in the future where we do have our Tusken Raiders squad. I just don't think it is going to be this quarter. That would surprise me a little bit, even though I'm hoping for it and I've been predicting it in the past 2 videos. This time around, my enthusiasm is a little tempered. Hopefully by the next time we do this quarterly speculation video in 3 months, we see a couple of the things that I would like to see. That 8th viable fleet for Grand Arena, changes to the Gamorrean Guard, and maybe even the Tusken Raider, at least some Omicrons that make them more viable characters. Inquisitors, I hope the information that I've been giving to be a little careful with the gear turns out to be helpful advice. And most of all, Chrysanthemum, really looking forward to him being in the game. It's happening at some point. Some of the other characters, not as convinced, but there is no way CG passes on a character like Chrysanthemum. Thank you for watching. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. Be safe out there, everyone, and be excellent to each other.